All right, let's dive in. Today it's 1 Corinthians 13.
The love chapter, as it's often called.
Right, exactly, the love chapter. But we're going deeper than, just those nice-sounding wedding readings. We really want to figure out what this passage is telling us about love.
Especially the type of love known as a gap.
Yes, a gap. Now, you sent over some really interesting notes. Your analysis of the text, I think that'll really help us as we go.
I hope so.
So it's kind of like that thing, those optical illusions. At first you see one thing, right?
Yeah.
But the more you look, the more you see. More layers, more details. And that's what we're doing here today.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Paul starts off talking about spiritual gifts. Prophecy, speaking in tongues, even faith that can move mountains.
Pretty impressive stuff.
Right. And then he says they're nothing without love. Without love.
Yeah, he kind of throws a curveball there, doesn't he? You'd think those gifts would be, well, the ultimate goal.
Right. But he's flipping the script.
He is. Paul's saying those gifts, they might be impressive, but without love at the core, they mean nothing. They're empty.
So it's less about having the gifts and more about how they're used. Like, what's the motivation behind them?
Exactly. It's like, imagine someone, they're bragging about how generous they are, but they're actually giving grudgingly, or that like, they have some ulterior motive. The act itself might look good, but
It just feels off, right?
it does.
Like their heart isn't really in it. I get what you mean.
Right, and that's where agape comes in.
Ah, yes. And my notes, actually, I pointed out how that Greek word agape is defined. It's a choice, not just a feeling. It's an active decision.
A very important distinction.
And that's what I love about this passage. It doesn't just say love is great. It gives us actions, a way to be.
It's practical.
It is. Like love is patient, it says. Love is kind. It doesn't envy. It doesn't boast. It's not proud. It's not rude. It's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs.
Wow, you really know this passage.
I do. I love it. It's like a blueprint.
It is. And remember that line, love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth.
Oh, yeah. That one really stands out. Always has.
It's powerful, isn't it? It's saying agape isn't passive. You have to actively seek what is good and true, even when it's hard.
So it's not just about accepting everything that comes your way. You have to be discerning. Figure out what's actually true and align yourself with that.
Which, let's face it, is not always easy.
No, it's not. Truth can be elusive.
It requires effort, it requires thought, and sometimes you have to challenge your own assumptions. It's a journey, really.
It is. And speaking of journeys, I love how the passage then compares understanding love to, well, a child growing up.
That's a beautiful analogy.
We all know kids, right? They have limited views, self-centered sometimes.
But they grow, they learn.
Exactly. Just like we can grow in our understanding of agapesis as we experience life, make mistakes, our perspective changes.
It broadens. We see things differently. And this actually ties in with that seeing through a glass darkly image.
Right. My notes mention that too. What did Paul mean by that, though? It's a little mysterious.
Well, he's saying right now our understanding of love and of God, it's limited. It's like a blurry reflection.
I see.
But through agape, we move towards a more perfect understanding, like seeing face to face.
Okay. So agape isn't just about how we treat other people. It's about how we approach truth and knowledge, too.
I think you're right on the money there. It shapes our entire worldview.
Wow. This is giving me a lot to think about. So much more to agape than just emotions.
Definitely.
It's about action, about making choices, even intellectual honesty.
And we haven't even gotten to the part where Paul says faith and hope actually take a back seat to love. That always gets me thinking.
Hold on. We don't need a break or anything. Let's just keep going.
Okay, sure.
Why does he say love is greater than faith and hope? I mean, those seem pretty important for a meaningful life.
They are, but Paul is highlighting something specific about agape, its permanence. Prophecies will cease, he says. Knowledge will vanish away, but love remains.
So even faith and hope, as crucial as they are, they're somehow connected to our earthly existence. But agape goes beyond that.
Yes, it transcends those limitations. It's enduring.
I see. So why is love considered the greatest? What sets it apart?
The passage suggests that agape reflects something eternal, something divine. It's a reflection of God's nature.
You're talking about the concept of God is love.
Yeah.
Central to Christian theology.
Exactly. If God is eternal and agape reflects God, then agape must also be eternal.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like a bridge then, between us and the divine.
Beautifully put. And that bridge, it's built through our choices, our actions, all guided by agape.
So it all comes back to choice, doesn't it? Agape isn't just something that happens to you. It's something you cultivate.
It is. But how we do that, how we cultivate that kind of love, especially in a world that can feel so chaotic.
Well, that's a question for another time. Maybe.
Whoa, come on. We have plenty of time. We can keep going. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on that.
All right, all right. You got me. Let's dive into it then. We'll see where this conversation takes us. So you were saying something about agape in action. What comes to mind when you think about, like, actually putting this love into practice, especially when the world, well, it doesn't always feel very loving, does it?
It doesn't.
Yeah.
What strikes me about this passage is it's not just like this vague idea about love. It's actually really practical.
Oh, I agree.
It's a guide for how we deal with like relationships, our community, even ourselves.
Right. And one of the most challenging but also most rewarding aspects of agape is forgiveness. The passage specifically says, love keeps no record of wrongs. That's a tall order.
It is. I mean, it's easy to say, forgive and forget, but to actually let go of resentment and hurt, that takes real effort, courage even.
You're absolutely right. Forgiveness isn't about being weak or saying what someone did was okay. It's about choosing to let go of the bitterness and anger, all that stuff that can really poison us.
So it's almost like forgiving someone is a gift, not just to them, but to yourself.
It is. It's freeing yourself from that burden.
I can see that.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about agape in action, we got to be real, right? The world can be a tough place.
It can be.
Sometimes it feels like cynicism wins. Like everyone's just looking out for themselves. How do we hold on to that loving spirit when we're surrounded by so much negativity?
That's a question that people have been asking for centuries. Think about Paul. He was writing this letter to a community facing some serious stuff. Persecution, division, you name it. They were trying to figure out how to live their faith in a really hostile environment. And even then, he's saying, choose love, choose agape, even when it's hard.
Even when it seems impossible.
Exactly.
So how do we do that? Give me something concrete. What are some practical ways we can cultivate that kind of resilient love?
Well, I think it starts small. Everyday choices. Choosing to be kind instead of judgmental. Patient instead of getting frustrated. Empathy instead of indifference. It's remembering that every interaction, every little one, is a chance to practice agape.
I like that. Focusing on the small stuff, the little acts of love, it makes it feel less overwhelming.
It does. And another thing to remember is we're not alone in this.
Oh, good point.
One of the amazing things about agape, it's contagious. When we choose to love, even when things are tough, it can inspire other people. They see it and it kind of spreads.
It's like a ripple effect. Like one small act of kindness can have such a huge impact.
Absolutely. Think about it. Has there ever been a time when someone did something nice for you, something small, but it just made your day, made you feel better about the world?
Definitely. Happens all the time.
Those moments, they remind us of how powerful love can be, even in those little things.
So true. Like that saying, be the change you want to see.
But to bring it back to the passage, how does this agape love relate to faith and hope? Because Paul does say love is greater, but they all seem pretty vital, for a meaningful life. You're right, and I think this gets to the core of, well, Christian spirituality in a way. It's not like faith, hope, and love are competing with each other. They're all connected. They actually support each other.
Okay, I'm following. But how? Give me an example.
All right, think of it this way. Faith, that's the foundation. It's the belief in something bigger than ourselves. That gives our life purpose, meaning, hope. That's the fuel, The belief that even when things are tough, there's something better waiting. Light at the end of the tunnel, and then agape, that's the action. That's how we live out our faith and hope in the real world.
I'm with you. So faith gives us a reason to hope. Hope gives us the strength to keep going. And agape is how we show it all, how we put those beliefs into practice.
Exactly. They work together to create a life that's, well, meaningful and impactful. And if we look back in history, there are so many examples of people and movements that were driven by this same combination, faith, hope, and love, like the civil rights movement, for example.
Oh, powerful example. Those fighting for equality, they were fueled by faith in the dignity of all people, a hope for a better future, and a commitment to love, even those who hated them.
And that's what makes agape so radical. It's not about loving those who love us back. It's about loving the difficult people, the ones who challenge us, who are different from us. It's about showing grace and compassion, even when it feels undeserved.
That's hard, but it's inspiring too. It shows how love can change people, communities, even whole societies.
It can. And it's not always easy. But the rewards of choosing agape, they're immeasurable. It brings peace, joy, a sense of purpose that goes beyond all the ups and downs life throws at us.
I can see that. Embracing agape can lead to a more fulfilling life. But let's be honest. We all mess up sometimes. We get caught up in our own stuff, our ego, our hurts, our frustrations. What do we do when we inevitably fall short of that agape ideal?
That's a great question. And you're right, we're all human, we're all going to make mistakes. The important thing is to not let those mistakes define us. Agape isn't about being perfect, it's about progress. It's about striving to do better, to be better every single day.
So it's about having grace for ourselves as well as others.
Exactly. Being kind to yourself is a huge part of this. Recognizing that we're imperfect and learning from those mistakes.
You know, this deep dive, it's really changing how I think about love. It's not just about romantic relationships or feeling good. It's about making choices, seeking truth, cultivating forgiveness and compassion for ourselves and others.
And remembering that agape is a journey. It's not a destination. We're all always learning, growing. There's always room for improvement.
I like that. It's ongoing. Takes the pressure off a bit.
It does. It allows us to embrace our imperfections and to focus on the journey, knowing that every step towards agape is a step towards a more meaningful life.
This conversation's been so helpful. I feel inspired to really look at my own life and see where I can put these ideas into practice.
That's fantastic. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to encourage you, dear listener, to do the same. Think about your own experiences with agape, the times you've given it, received it, and how it shaped you. And maybe through that reflection, you'll find new ways to embrace this love in your own life. Because in the end, agape isn't just a concept, it's a way of life.
You know, when you say it's a way of life, that makes me think, what does that actually look like?
Yeah.
Like in our everyday life, what are some practical examples?
That's a good question. I think it can show up in so many ways, big and small. Could
Right.
be like being patient with a coworker who's having a rough day, or really listening to a friend who needs to talk, or even just, holding the door open for someone.
Yeah, it's like shifting our whole mindset from what can I get to
Yeah.
what can I give.
Exactly. And it's not about expecting something back in return. It's just about offering kindness and compassion because it's the right thing to do, because
Yeah.
it's aligned with that truth that Paul's talking about.
One thing that's always kind of bothered me about 1 Corinthians 13, it seems to flip the script on how we usually think about virtues. Like saying love is even greater than faith and hope. It's kind of radical.
It is bold, but I think that's why it's so powerful. It makes us rethink things, look beyond the surface, and recognize that love, specifically agape love, it's the most transformative force there is.
I wonder, do you think agape has been, I don't know, maybe misinterpreted or even misused throughout history?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I think the answer is probably yes. Like anything powerful, agape can be twisted. Used to serve agendas that aren't really about love at all.
Like what? Can you give me an example?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is using love to justify harmful actions or to keep oppressive systems in place. We've seen that happen time and time again, where people in power use the language of love to control others or silence anyone who disagrees with them.
That's scary. Makes you realize you have to think critically, even when it comes to something like love.
You do. We can't just accept any interpretation of love without looking at the motivation behind it. What are the consequences? True agape, it's always aligned with justice, with compassion, with respect for everyone.
Yeah, that's a good point. Even good intentions can go wrong if they're not really rooted in love.
Exactly. And I think that's why the passage stresses the importance of truth. True agape isn't blind or sentimental. It's based on a clear understanding of what's good and right and just.
So it's not just about feeling lovey-dovey, it's about doing what's right, even when it's hard.
You got it. And that's what makes it so transformative. It pushes us, challenges us, helps us create a more just and compassionate world.
I want to touch on something you mentioned earlier about agape being contagious. That's such a hopeful idea that just by choosing love, even in small ways, we can create a ripple effect.
It's a powerful image, right? We can all be agents of love. We don't need fancy titles or positions. We can just embody agape in our daily lives. And by doing that, we contribute to a more loving and compassionate world.
It's like we each have the power to make a difference. Maybe not a huge one, but a difference nonetheless. And who knows, maybe if enough of us choose a gap, we can start to shift things towards kindness, empathy, understanding.
I believe we can. I think that's really the message at the heart of 1 Corinthians 13. Love isn't just this abstract idea. It's a force for change, a catalyst for transformation.
This deep dive has been amazing. I'm looking at love in a whole new light. I'm excited to see how I can actually live this out.
That's wonderful to hear. And remember, it's a journey. There's always more to learn and grow. And there's always room for more love in the world.
So well said. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into 1 Corinthians 13. It's really been a pleasure.
My pleasure as well. And to you, dear listener, I hope this conversation has given you some new insights and inspired you to embrace this incredible love in your own life. Until next time.